Hello, in this video I'm going to be looking at the Sherman Easy 8, or well, just the M4A3E8. This is basically the M4A3E8 in tier 7. It's not got any armor, it's not got the best mobility, its gun reloads quickly, and it has 12 degrees of gun depression. That is kind of it about this tank. It is basically a T23E3 with 12 degrees of gun depression and an overall worse gun and mobility profile. Or it could also be compared to the Comet. But this tank is essentially just an Easy 8 up at tier 7, and it is free, so that would explain why some of its stats maybe aren't the best. But we do know how this tank is going to be coming, the Sherman Easy 8. It is going to be by a mission where you have to get 7 kills starting from, well, I'm not actually sure when it starts, but it is essentially where a mission where you have to get 7 kills a day for, I'm not sure how long, maybe a week, and then you will unlock this tank for free. This tank only sells for 500 gold, so it isn't really worth actually selling. You may as well just keep it in your garage to collect dust. But the Sherman Easy 8 is going to be completely for free. There is of course a review on the website if you do want to have a look without this commentary. But here you can see its armor. Against 160mm of AP, which is fairly normal tier 7 medium tank penetration, you can see there is no armor at all. The strongest areas of the hull are the lower parts of the upper plate, being 175 thick, or the lower plate up to 200 thick. Other than this, the rest of the upper plate is only 110, which is very bad, very weak, considering how large this tank is as well. On top of this, the turret is weak, the cheeks only being 90 to 120, and the gun mantlet only 130mm thick. Unlike the T23E3, the gun mantlet of this tank is not at all troll. The T23E3's is actually somewhat troll, and you can get some bounces, especially on the edges. Not with this one. This one is very, very weak, and it is basically tier 6 armor up at tier 7. You can also see that when you do switch to premium ammo, those strong areas on the lower plate and the bottom area of the upper plate do just disappear. So yeah, not great armor for the Sherman Easy 8. Side armor is also quite weak at 44mm thick, which is very easy to HE for essentially anything. Even a 90mm with slightly increased penetration or calibrated shells could go through your hull sides. So you do have to watch out, considering it is a Sherman hull, it is very big, and it's quite easy to HE. Next, you can see, using gun depression in the top image, 160mm of AP, it still doesn't have armor. 208 APCR in the bottom image, again, no armor. The only areas that could bounce are the bottom area of the upper plate and maybe the very edges of the turret, but you can also see that 140mm thick isn't enough to bounce anything at tier 7, and even at tier 6 really, as most tanks have between 130 and 150mm of penetration. So very bad news for the armor of the Easy 8. Next, moving to the gun, you can see this tank mounts a 76.2mm gun. Its ammo is AP, APCR and HE. Its penetration is 160, 220, 46. So penetration wise, it's actually pretty interesting. 160 is average, fairly average for a tier 7 medium, though it is on the higher end. 220 on APCR is actually very good for a tier 7 medium, and 46 on HE is also very good for a 76mm gun, as these usually only have 38mm of HE penetration. But it's kind of pointless because its HE is worse, being only 180 damage compared to the usual 200, so definitely not impressive at all on the HE damage. Its alpha damage is also only 150 and 130 on AP and APCR respectively, which is less than the usual 160, 140. So again, less alpha damage, when it's 160 is already one of the lowest at tier 7, so not great news there. 3.5 second reload as well is also not better than any of the other, well, not better than the T23E3 or the Comet, which means this tank only has 2583 DPM compared to those other two tanks, which I believe have closer to 2800 or something around there. But still, 2583 isn't the worst DPM for tier 7. It is still quite good. It's just that your alpha isn't that great, and you do have to try take advantage of this fast reload more than your high DPM. In terms of aim time, it's also not the most impressive, though 3.1, 3.3 isn't bad at all. Its base aim time is what's poor at 2.3, that's more like a heavy tank, but it does have very good dispersion, 0.312, and very good gun handling. In fact, some of the best in all of tier 7, 0.11, 0.11 and 0.05 on turret traverse. Though you do notice the shell velocity 792 on AP and HE is quite low, and 990 on APCR. Not really too impressive, but also not the worst in tier 7. In fact, still fairly decent. Gun depression is -12, which is very good, but again, it's not that impressive when you do consider the EZ8 is a bit taller than the T23E3, and the Comet also has 12, so 12 is nice, but it's not as good as it might seem at first. Overall, this gun isn't terrible, however it does suffer just like the other lower alpha guns with that 150 alpha, meaning it does need to put in multiple shots against enemies, and it can be hard to rack up damage if enemies are actually looking at you, because most other tanks have higher damage, meaning if they're looking at you, you take damage, you're going to take more than you are putting back into the enemy. So it does make it a little bit awkward to play in that sense. But overall, not the worst gun. It's just unfortunate that its mobility and armor can't really support that gun. So mobility, you can see 52 top speed, pretty good for a tier 7 actually. Reverse speed 18, not that good for a medium. Acceleration rate 18.7 is pretty decent for a medium. And this tank weighs 30 tons. So it has the same acceleration on hard terrain, 18.7, with 59.3 traverse speed, which is quite good traverse speed. However, just like the T-34-85 Breakthrough, this tank only has 15 horsepower per ton on medium terrain, making it one of the slower, less mobile mediums of tier 7, and its traverse speed is also not impressive at 47 degrees per second, and that is just due to this 1.25 terrain resistance on medium terrain. So not impressive mobility at all. Its top speed is good, but it's not really getting there too often. Its reverse speed is definitely below average, as most have 20, and that 2 km/h difference does make a big difference for a medium tank when going in reverse. On top of this, not great acceleration, not great traverse speed on medium terrain, which is the most abundant terrain type in the game. On top of this, it doesn't really have the armor to justify this, unlike the T-34-85 Breakthrough does. Of course, you do have the engine power boost consumable to make yourself go faster forward and in reverse, which this one is actually very much useful on the Sherman EZ8, just because its mobility isn't that impressive, and you're always playing a support role, really, no matter which tier you are playing at. So definitely do use improved engine power boost on this tank, it is definitely needed. On top of that, adrenaline definitely needed, as this tank is a fast reloading sort of high DPM vehicle which really specializes in having a quick 3.5 second reload, so adrenaline is definitely needed to help take advantage of that and situations where you can just put in a lot of shots. Next, equipment. So gun rammer is definitely mandatory on this tank. Do not use calibrated shells. For one, it has good penetration, but two, this is a tank specializing in a fast reload and good DPM, so gun rammer is definitely needed just to take advantage of that, even though it is only quote-unquote only 0.2 seconds, that 130 DPM, that 0.2 seconds, does make a big difference in racking up the damage, whereas the extra penetration generally isn't going to make the biggest difference when this tank's main trait is that fast reload. Next, defense system and improved optics. Engine accelerator, again just like the T-34-85 Breakthrough. This tank doesn't have great acceleration or traverse speed, so this is definitely needed for getting up to your top speed on medium terrain and just being overall a bit mobile. Next, improved assembly. Definitely this over enhanced armor, because there just is no armor to be enhancing. The extra HP, while only 50, does still help you survive a few high rolls, maybe survive an HE from a smasher, so that extra 50 HP is still needed. Next, gun lane drive, because this tank has fairly unimpressive aim time for its 150 alpha damage. Yeah, its shell velocity also isn't very impressive, and you could use supercharger just to min-max on the snapshotting ability of this tank, which actually does work out because this tank has very good gun handling. But personally, for me, I do like having a bit better aim time, though supercharger does work with how this tank kind of plays as a second line support vehicle in most battles. Next, vertical stabilizer or refined gun. Again, just like the other tanks, you can choose to min-max on the refined gun, the dispersion with refined gun, by having the best possible dispersion and snapshot ability, or you can use vertical stabilizer, again helping with snapshotting, but this one improves the aim time, effective aim time, a little bit. So for me personally on this tank, because this has such good gun handling, I'm going with refined gun. And you'll actually see in one of the battles, my gun gets damaged for a long period, but it's barely even noticeable, really. Next, toolbox and consumable delivery system as this tank. Well, you want to be using this consumable a bit more often rather than for longer, as you can get yourself into a few situations using it and then be able to cool down fast enough to get out of situations as well. So first, I believe I have 3 battles to show in this tank. Firstly, I want to show sort of this tank's DPM being used. I just want to show a short clip of sort of how this tank plays in some way. Again, of course, I do have the Dawn/Dusk mod installed, so tell me in the comments if you do prefer this mod or if you like having the vanilla look back. So, at first in this battle, I'm going to go towards this position in the mid. You can see it's more of a supporting second line position, and that's something I'd recommend to do in this tank. You don't want to be the one rushing to the front line, even when you're top tier really, because you just don't have the armor to be taking hits. You want to be a bit more of a support tank, of a second line tank. You want to get in later in the battle to be able to use your gun and DPM. You can see here now 2 enemies are now pushing towards my allied mediums. I believe I'm going to activate speed boost in a moment, maybe. But you can see it is now 3v2 over here, and now I'm going to push in and quote-unquote ambush these tanks using my very fast reload and high DPM. And you'll see here I'm not really focusing targets, but you can see the fast DPM working. And you'll see very quickly this Type 62 does go down. 1 shot, 2 shot, 3 shot, and this is what you want to do in this tank with the ridgeline. Keep moving so that enemies might miss your turret or maybe bounce off the edge of the gun mantlet, which is what just happened there. And you can see with the support of the Cryos now, we did take down those 2 tanks. Actually, 3 tanks, with the Hellcat and the other medium now also down. And now it is just down to the last remaining medium, the T-20. So you can see what is nice about having such a quick reload is that you can push in and support allies with that DPM. And when you're not the main focus of the enemy guns, you can put that gun to good use, as I just showed there. that was all the damage I did in that battle in that short period, but that's essentially sort of how you really want to be using this gun, to sort of get it into a support position, a supporting, well, a time in the battle where you can support allies and sort of ambush enemies with that high DPM. So the next battle I'm going to show is on Himmelsdorf. Again, top tier, because of course a tank like this performs best when it is top tier. Having the low alpha combined with not great armor and not great mobility just isn't going to do the best in a tier 8 matchup. So here on Himmelsdorf I'm going to be going towards base A. You can actually also see there's a T23E3 on our team, which is this tank's direct competitor, and in fact it is directly better than this tank, but you will see I'm going towards base A. Of course, with this tank's low alpha, against any enemy I face really, I want to be putting in 2 shots for every 1 that they put in. And you can see there, the very nice dispersion and gun handling of this tank, letting me just snap a shot into that AMX-12T without even aiming at all. I was still moving, and in fact I'd gone into cover by the time the shot hit that AMX. So the very nice gun handling of this tank showing itself. Now here you'll see I'm not wanting to push round, and yeah, you shouldn't side scrape in this tank. There's no point. I don't know really what I'm doing, hoping for a bounce on the side. But that VZ44-1 you can see just goes right through my gun mantlet and damages the gun. You can see the KV-13 does the same thing, comes around the corner, but this time he actually hits my gun and doesn't go through. Probably just due to hitting the gun directly and not the mantlet. But here you can see my gun is now damaged. But it's not going to be the biggest issue because this tank has actually got good gun handling and good dispersion. You'll see that I'm generally able to snap the shots without any problem, and that one was just badly aimed. But now we have gotten rid of 2 enemy tanks with only the 3 remaining on this flank. So like I was trying to say just now before the VZ damaged my gun, you do want to play this tank where you conserve your HP towards the beginning of the battle and not really trade it all off, because you don't really have the armor. If you can save that HP for later periods of the battle, then that HP does become an advantage you can use against the enemies, and combined with your nice DPM, it does really help out the tank in later stages of the battle to farm up. You can also see I loaded premium ammo against the VZ there, and that high premium penetration does help quite a lot on this tank, as I was able to just cut right through the upper plate of the VZ. But now Smasher, dangerous enemy, and he can one-shot me, so I do want to be a bit careful, and I'm not. Luckily he does miss. And again, the nice fast reload of this tank does let me put in quite a few shots into him. There you'll see I do miss a shot, of course. The dispersion is not always going to work out on this tank, and unfortunately the KV-3 does take me out and then go on to win the battle. But you can see in that battle quite a few things about this tank. The nice gun handling, even when my gun was damaged, the fast reload, and the armor occasionally working if you can get a KV-13 to bounce on your gun. But you can see 2,200 damage, making still a few credits, not that many of course because it was a loss, but still a decent amount of damage in a fairly short battle. So this second battle, well, third technically, is on New Bay, and this one's a bit interesting. I'm going to get myself into a bit of a funny situation, but again, with this tank, I'm going to be going towards the medium side, of course, because that's where generally the less armoured tanks are, and where this tank's DPM is going to be able to farm up against those vehicles. But you'll see I was looking back at my team to see where they were going, so you can see that I did miss the Sherman Firefly and the Bulldog crossing. Sorry, not the Bulldog. Was it a Bulldog? It was T-71. But anyway, there are now a ton of tanks down here, and I do not know what is happening. So I am now a bit stuck in this position, but again you can see snapshot of the Jagdpanzer IV. This tank's nice gun handling. The Bulldog does rush me, but then luckily my team does deal with him quickly, otherwise I might be dead. And now there is an Su-152 with the 122mm gun sitting in front of me. So I'm completely pinned. There's an ARL behind me, there's a Jagdpanzer IV behind, out in the open, there's an Su-152 in front, there's a Sherman Firefly watching the corner in front of me, and now there's a T-71 completely in front where that building is. So you'll see here I do try to use the HE a bit. 195 is a plus 15 roll, which it shouldn't be considering the usual damage for a 76 is 200. But you can see I'm sort of stuck here, and in a situation like this it's not great because you're not using your DPM. That's kind of the main thing about this tank. It's fast reload and it's pretty good DPM. But seeing the Jagdpanzer IV just kind of tunnel visioning, I do poke out and put in a shot into him. And then considering he didn't move, I'm going to do it again. And you can see this tank's very nice gun handling. Even though I'm moving, I'm easily able to snapshot into the track of the Jagdpanzer, and now he's gone. But you can see here, this is the nice thing about a tank like this. It's fast reload and it's good DPM do allow it to farm up a lot of damage very quickly when a tank is exposed and when that tank is not looking at you. You can see I was in an awkward situation for quite a while there, but I was able to farm up 2,200 damage and a lot of it on that Jagdpanzer and the ARL in quite a short amount of time, which is the nice thing about playing tanks like the Comet, this one, and the T-23E3. Considering this one is completely for free, kind of makes sense why it has a few downsides compared to the T-23E3 and Comet. Overall, not the worst vehicle, but out of these four which are going to be available, it is definitely the weakest one. But still, not an unusable tank. It is still pretty fun to play just because it has the quick reload. So you can see now it is just a Bulldog left, and consider this tank's unimpressive mobility, I'm not going to be able to catch him. Actually, on medium terrain, sorry, on hard terrain, which is what this is, the mobility isn't so unimpressive, but you can see there 800 shell velocity. I should have really shot before the Bulldog crossed, but I didn't. But you can see here I'm going to lead it a little bit, which does let me get in a shot on that Bulldog. You will see now I do activate the speed boost to try and catch him, but still, of course, Bulldog, one of the fastest light tanks in the game. Though that gun handling does come in a little bit lucky there, as I do manage to get one final shot on the Bulldog before, well, the game is going to inevitably end by supremacy. So in that battle I did do almost 3,000 damage with 865 assisted. Of course the ace and the high caliber will give me a bit extra on the credits, making 113,000, which is not terrible considering it is a tier 7 tank. Though 3,000 damage, would have expected a little bit more, but I'm not sure that I had a credit booster installed in that battle. But yes, the Sherman Easy 8. Out of these four tanks, I would say it is the weakest. Again, I would rank them with number 1 being the Tiger Frontline, number 2 the Type 5808, then number 3 the T-3485 Breakthrough, and the Sherman Easy 8 being by far the least impressive out of these four vehicles, just because it lacks mobility, it lacks armour, and its gun isn't great either. But It's not an unusable tank. It is still pretty fun for tier 7, considering it's completely free. It's not the worst thing in the world. And yeah, it is still a tank that is worth at least collecting in your garage. Again, it only sells for 500 gold, so it isn't worth selling really. You may as well just keep it in your garage as, well, a tank to collect. But yeah, that is it for the Sherman Easy 8. Thanks for watching.